Part 45. The Prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 441. Shen Shuwei was still nervous when she became a matchmaker for the first time. She picked up the teacup, brought it to her mouth and blew on it, taking 2 sips to build up her courage. She also worked hard for the game in the future. I have nothing to do and work part-time. Chengzi said, hello, what is a part-time job? Shen Shuwei explained, it's just to do other things in your spare time to increase your extra income, for example, game. Chengzi nodded, I understand, but why do you want to be a matchmaker for me? Shen Shuwei took a few sips of tea to relieve his tension. You and I are the same age. You see, I already have a son and a daughter. Shouldn't you be planning to deal with personal issues? Chengzi saw that Shen Shuwei was so serious, so she had to reply, I want to serve my master for a few more years, and I am not in a hurry to get married. I'm not asking you to get married right away. How about we get to know each other first, and then get along with each other if we feel good about each other? It was Shen Shuwei's first time as a matchmaker, and he didn't know how to talk to a matchmaker. What he said should be right, right? Master, I really don't want to. Chengzi lowered her eyes and held the hem of her clothes with her hands, as if she was embarrassed, but also as if she was stubbornly insisting on something. Shen Shuwei confirmed again, you really don't want to? You don't even know who I'm going to be a matchmaker for. Chengzi shook her head, even if I want to get married, I want to marry the man I like, as loving as my master and his highness. If not, I would rather not marry. As for who it is, it doesn't matter. Okay, Shen Shuwei would not force anyone to make things difficult, and then she looked at Chun 11 curiously, then do you have someone you like? Chengzi thought of Qin Xiao and her face turned red involuntarily. Yes, there is one. Shen Chu came over slightly and couldn't help but asked with a gossipy heart, who is it? Chengzi was embarrassed to say it. After all, everyone knew each other, and it would not be good for Qin Xiao to say it. I'll tell the master later. I'm really interested. Let's ask His Highness to be your matchmaker. After Shen Shuwei finished speaking, she thought of Qin Xiao. It seemed that Qin Xiao had no hope. Chengzi was a little flattered, I'm afraid I won't have this chance. Shen Shuwei took Chun 11's hand and said, no, you are beautiful and capable. The key is that you are such a good cook. There is no reason for the other party to look down on you. Besides, even if it is not his food, there is a saying that if a female pursues you, men's space or gauze, you can try it. Chengzi suddenly gained confidence after being praised by Shen Shuwei, but when she thought of what Qin Xiao said, her shoulders slumped again. Let's talk about it later. I'm not in a hurry to get married now. Shen Shuwei gossiped again, is that man handsome? Chengzi blushed and nodded. Qin Xiao has an average figure and appearance. He is the leader among the guards and is very handsome. When Shen Shuwei heard this, she was even more curious about who Chengzi liked. Unfortunately, no matter how she asked, Chengzi wouldn't tell her, so she could only be curious. When sleeping at night, Shen Shuwei lay on Xiao Jinyan, Your Highness, if Chengzi wants to get married, can you be her matchmaker? Of course Xiao Jinyan had to agree to his wife's request, and Chengzi was indeed very loyal. When Shen Shuwei was almost punished at Xiaoxiang Pavilion, Chengzi never left her. Okay, I can arrange the marriage. Shen Shuwei held Xiao Jinyan's handsome face in his hands happily and said, Bhe, I will prepare a generous dowry for her then so that she can get married decently. Xiao Jinyan asked calmly, who does Chengzi like? Shen Chu shook his head slightly, I don't know. Chengzi is too shy to say it. Xiao Jinyan. You don't know anything, so you rush to ask him to marry you. Shen Chu slightly thought of Qin Xiao and felt a little regretful. By the way, Qin Xiao fell in love with Chun 11 and asked my concubine to be his matchmaker, but Chun 11 refused. When Qin Xiao was mentioned, Xiao Jinyan's eyes froze. Qin Xiao was his personal bodyguard and the person he trusted the most. If Qin Xiao fell in love with Chengzi, he would naturally hope that the two of them could become friends. I didn't see what Qin Xiao was thinking. Shen Chu said softly, I didn't notice it either, but Qin Xiao is not bad either. He is handsome, tall, and has a good figure. Although he is a bit silly, he is still a good husband. Xiao Jinyan listened to Xiaju praising Qin Xiao, and when he heard about his great figure, his face turned dark. What did you say? Shen Chu paused for a moment and repeated, I say Qin Xiao is quite suitable to be a husband. Xiao Jinyan's eyes darkened, the above sentence. Shen Chu asked slightly, is Qin Xiao a little stupid? Xiao Jinyan said with a cold face, no, just say the same thing again. Shen Chu blinked twice and asked doubtfully, is it because Qin Xiao is handsome? Is it because Qin Xiao has a good figure? Hearing his wife praise another man again, Xiao Jinyan's face darkened a little. How do you know if Qin Xiao has a great figure? Shen Chuwei said matter-of-factly, I guessed it, you see Qin Xiao is tall and a martial arts practitioner, his figure is definitely not bad, his chest and abs. Shen Chuwei watched Xiao Jinyan grabbing her hand and caressing his chest muscles, all the way down. Under the palm of his hand were clearly visible abdominal muscle lines. Shen Chuwei's eyes widened. Xiao Jinyan stared at Xiaoju with his phoenix eyes. When he saw her eyes falling on him, he asked in a low voice, how is my figure? Shen Chuwei replied honestly, the muscles are very strong. Xiao Jinyan asked again, how does it compare to Qin Xiao? Shen Chuwei's eyes fell on the mermaid line. The faintly visible line was very sexy. Of course His Highness has the best figure. Xiao Jinyan sneered, your husband has such a great figure, how can you still care about others? Shen Chuwei raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyan, her arm actively wrapped around his neck, and the other hand lingered on his abdominal muscles. How could I pay attention to others? My eyes are all on His Highness now. Xiao Jinyan put his big hand on the back of her head, making them close to each other, and his warm breath burst out, making Shen Chuwei shudder. Are you still praising other men? Shen Chuwei shook her head vigorously, I will only praise my husband in the future. Even so, Xiao Jinyan did not intend to let her go, so that she would remember it for a long time. Shen Chuwei was about to cry. In the end, she really cried. The next day, Shen Chuwei dragged her tired body and finished breakfast. She was going to leave for the palace soon, but she was still very happy because she could see the two babies. Qin Xiao went to catch live game early in the morning. When he saw Shen Chuwei, he came over and saluted, Crown Princess. Shen Chuwei rubbed her aching waist, guard Qin. Qin Xiao looked at Shen Chuwei expectantly, Crown Princess, is there a result? Shen Chuwei looked at Qin Xiao's expectant eyes and hesitated. Qin Xiao asked doubtfully, hasn't the Crown Princess asked yet? Shen Chuwei said, I asked, Chengzi said she's not in a hurry to get married now. Qin Xiao breathed a sigh of relief, so that's the case. I'm not in a hurry either. I've been single for 27 years anyway, so I don't mind waiting for 2 more years. Shen Chuwei couldn't help asking, what if Chengzi doesn't like you? Don't like me? Qin Xiao was stunned for a long time before replying, if Chengzi doesn't like me, I still want to wait. Shen Chuwei couldn't bear to tell Qin Xiao the truth, and sighed in her heart that it was not easy to be a matchmaker. Qin Xiao was Xiao Jinyan's personal guard, and there were still many things to do before returning to the palace. As soon as Qin Xiao left, Chengzi came. Seeing Qin Xiao's back as he walked away, she asked Shen Chuwei, Master, is there anything Qin Xiao wants to talk to you about? Shen Chuwei sighed and was struggling whether to say it. Chengzi remembered that there were still things to pack, so she hurried into the tent. Shen Chuwei secretly breathed a sigh of relief and planned to go back to the palace to talk about it. When getting on the carriage, Shen Shuwei held Xiao Bai first. Xiao Jinyan held Sichuan, who was human, but very delicate. After everything was ready, a group of people returned to the palace in a mighty manner. Shen Shuwei leaned on the carriage. She had not recovered from the intense exercise last night for several hours. She looked at the instigator, who was reading a book seriously. She ate the freshly roasted wild pigeon to comfort her injured heart. At this time, the queen asked people to prepare some soft pillows to cushion the dog emperor's back so that he would not feel uncomfortable. The emperor looked at the queen who was making tea, and when she finished, he called out, "Ling-er, come over here. Babies, please support me with monthly tickets. Good night, please support me with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 442. Chapter 442. The dog emperor seduces the queen with secrets again, and the induction goo keeps calling for the secret to be revealed. The queen placed the teapot firmly on the stove and looked back at the dog emperor, looking at him leaning on the soft pillow, his narrow phoenix eyes showing a rare laziness. If the emperor has something to say, just say it. I am not deaf and can hear you. The emperor looked at the queen's calm expression and felt a little hurt. He thought the queen would be happy with what he said yesterday, but she said, "Is this considered a secret?" The emperor knows how to deceive his concubines. "What I said yesterday was true. Don't Ling-er believe it?" The queen picked up the teacup, slowly cooled it down, and took a few sips. Only the emperor knows best whether he is telling the truth or not. The emperor sighed, sat up straight, and held his forehead with one hand. Pain came from his shoulder, and he realized that he had used the injured shoulder. He had to silently change his hand to support his forehead, and looked at the queen lightly. "Does Ling-er have a secret?" The queen paused while drinking tea, then raised her beautiful eyes and said, "Yes." The emperor never knew that the queen had secrets, so he immediately became interested and said, "Tell me about it." The queen said quietly, "I will not tell the emperor." "Emperor, it's better not to say anything. Today's breakfast was greasy, and I was a little thirsty. I finished the cup of tea in a short time." When the emperor learned that the queen had a secret, he felt as if he was heartbroken. He always felt that the secret in the queen's heart was related to Yechu. "I don't know who Yechu is, and I haven't found out after searching for so long. I have another secret, Ling-er wants to know." The queen raised her head and replied with a smile, "I don't want to know." The emperor raised his eyebrows, "Are you sure?" Although the queen wanted to know what other secrets the dog emperor had, in order to show that she didn't care, she replied firmly with two words, "Of course." The emperor nodded thoughtfully, "That's good." The queen put the teacup back after quenching her thirst. It would take a day to return to the palace. She took a soft pillow and put it in the carriage, lay down and fell asleep. The emperor saw this, sat up straight and leaned over, and asked in the empress's ear, "Ling-er, does your secret have anything to do with me?" The queen was not stupid. She guessed that the dog emperor was trying to trick her, but she refused to say anything. "Your Majesty, I'm tired of my concubines. How about we wait until we wake up?" The emperor didn't get the answer and wasn't angry. "Okay, you rest first." The queen closed her eyes again. The emperor simply lay down next to the queen. Because his right shoulder was injured, he could only lie on his side, with his back facing the queen. He said quietly, "My secret is related to the concubines in the harem." As soon as she finished speaking, the queen opened her eyes suddenly. "Is there any secret between the dog emperor and the concubines in the harem?" She turned to look behind her and saw the dog emperor lying with his back to her. She knew clearly that the dog emperor might be trying to trick her, but she couldn't help but be curious. At this moment, the queen saw the emperor turning his head and looking at each other. It was too late for her to turn around. The emperor chuckled, "Ling-er wants to know. I don't want to know. The queen looked back angrily, closed her eyes and continued to sleep. The emperor stared at the queen's back for a while and then looked away. Linger wants to know, so feel free to come to me. The queen snorted in her heart, that's nice to say. The guard of honor marched down the official road. Qin Xiao looked around and drove his horse to Chun 11's carriage. Chun 11. Chengzi was sleeping in the car, so naturally she couldn't hear Qin Xiao calling her. Duckweed saw that Chengzi was sleeping, so he leaned out and lifted the curtain of the carriage, and saw Qin Xiao sitting on the tall horse. Qin Xiao has long sword-shaped eyebrows and starry eyes, and is handsome. More importantly, Qin Xiao is the person next to the prince and has a bright future. If she could marry Qin Xiao, she wouldn't have to do menial work all day long. Duckweed smiled gently and asked, "Guard Qin, is something okay?" Qin Xiao said, "I'm looking for Chengzi." Duckweed lowered his head and glanced at Chengzi, who was sleeping soundly. "Chengzi is sleeping. If you have anything to say, Guard Qin can tell me and I will pass it on to Chengzi." Qin Xiao refused directly after hearing this, "No need." With that said, he drove his horse back to its original position. Duckweed looked at Qin Xiao's leaving figure. After putting down the car curtain, he looked at Chengzi, who was still sleeping. She didn't understand why Qin Xiao was so nice to her. The carriage swayed and rumbled continuously. Concubine Su was reading a storybook to relieve her boredom when she suddenly heard two crisp sounds. Being particularly sensitive to this sound, she immediately picked up the string of small bells around her waist and watched the little bells jump a few times in her palms. She subconsciously opened the car curtain and looked outside. The induction goose screamed, and the man in black was nearby. Concubine Su was excited and a little worried at the same time. Here are all the guards with strong martial arts. No matter how good the martial arts of the man in black is, his two fists are difficult to defeat with four hands. What if he is caught? She lay on the car window, looking at the trees that kept retreating, thinking that the man in black was not that stupid, right? Tao Liangyuan noticed that Concubine Su was lying on the car window for a long time without moving, so she asked curiously, "Concubine Su, what's wrong with you? Are you feeling uncomfortable? Do you want to call the imperial doctor?" Concubine Su quickly shook her head, "I'm fine, let's take a look at the scenery." Tao Liangyuan breathed a sigh of relief after hearing this, "You were lying motionless just now, which scared me." Concubine Su looked outside and wanted to see the man in black, but she didn't want to see him because she was afraid that he would be discovered by the guards. "I told His Highness about the palace 2 days ago." Hearing this, Tao Liangyuan put down the notebook in her hand, because Concubine Su wanted to go out of the palace, and she also wanted to know about His Highness's reaction. "What did Your Highness say?" Concubine Su said, "Your Highness didn't say anything. He only said that he would give me a decent reason to let me out of the palace." Tao Liangyuan was a little surprised. It was a little different from what she had imagined. "Does His Highness agree to leave the palace now?" "Promise, His Highness said that I can leave the palace whenever I want, but His Highness suggested that I leave the palace earlier. It is not good for the girl to be old." When these words came out of Xiao Jinyan's mouth, Concubine Su thought it was nothing. She just felt that Xiao Jinyan was thinking about her. But when the man in black said it, she felt unhappy. "I didn't realize it, but His Highness is actually quite good. If he were someone else, he would not be allowed to leave the palace even if he died alone in an empty room." Tao Liangyuan clenched the notebook in her hand, thinking that she had spent a lot of money to enter the palace, but if she stayed in the palace she would only guard an empty room until she died. It would be better to imitate Concubine Su and leave the palace early. Concubine Su turned back to look at Tao Liangyuan. "When I leave the palace, I will also find a man I love to marry. The most important thing is that it will be better if I can be as dedicated as Your Highness." "I'm tempted by what you said." Tao Liangyuan held her chin, feeling a little sad, "but it's not easy for someone as dedicated as His Highness." Concubine Su withdrew her gaze and looked out the window. The censer goo in her hand was still beating, indicating that the man in black had not left. Precisely because she didn't leave and couldn't see her again, Concubine Su was a little worried. In the afternoon, a large group of people stopped at an inn to rest and have a meal. Zhang Xiang, who was sleeping slightly at first, was woken up by Xiao Jinyan. Xiao Jinyan called twice at first, but failed to wake up Shen Shuwei. Looking at Xiaju sleeping soundly, he said again, "Xiaju, get up and have a meal." Shen Shuwei opened his eyes immediately when he heard the meal, and looked at Xiao Jinyan with half-awake eyes. "What are you eating? Is there a Buddha who jumps over the wall?" "Buddha jumps over the wall is more complicated. She may not have eaten for a long time, but when she opens her mouth, she must be craving for something delicious." Xiao Jinyan said, "There will be no Buddha jumping over the wall." Shen Shuwei paused after hearing the words. He remembered that he was on his way back to the palace and the conditions did not allow him to do so, so he stopped choosing. "There is no Buddha who jumps over the wall. It's okay to have meat. I don't choose my concubines." Xiao Jin shook his head helplessly and took her out of the carriage. A group of people followed the emperor and empress into the inn. Before the emperor and empress entered, guards had already gone in to clean up. The shopkeeper groveled and led the empress to the upstairs private room with a flattering smile. Shen Shuwei followed Xiao Jinyan to the private room next door. Xiao Jinyu took Miss Han and followed her in because there were so many people and it was so lively. Miss Han didn't talk much, especially when there were many people. She just sat quietly next to Xiao Jinyu. If it weren't for Miss Han being tall and beautiful, it would be easy for people to overlook her. The waiter came in and asked cautiously, "Your Highness, what do you want to order?" Xiao Jinyan said, braised pork elbow, and 3 more signature dishes." When Shen Shuwei heard the braised pork and sauced pork elbows, she knew that Xiao Jinyan ordered them specially for her, and she felt very happy. Xiao Jinyu also ordered, "There are also qingyu and tofu, vegetarian roast goose, and braised cabbage. I have taken note of everything." "Your Highness, King Yu, please wait a moment," the waiter said and exited. Changzi took out the teapot and tea leaves she brought with her, skillfully brewed a pot of tea, poured a cup of hot tea for everyone at the table, and then exited. As soon as she exited, she saw Qin Xiao standing at the door. She glanced at him, lowered her head and was about to leave, when she heard Qin Xiao shout, "Happy Spring!" Changzi paused, raised his head and looked at Qin Xiao doubtfully. "Is something wrong?" "Come with me." Qin Xiao took her hand and left. Changzi followed him with doubts. When he reached a place where no one was around, Qin Xiao let go of Chan 11's hand. He took out an oil paper bag from his arms and handed it to Chan 11. "This is for you." Changzi looked at the oil paper bag in front of her, as if she could smell the fragrance. "What is this?" "I just bought it because it smelled good on the roadside." "Try it." Qin Xiao didn't pay attention to roadside stalls before. Since meeting Changzi, whenever he goes out on the street, he will pay attention to the food sold on the roadside. Jewelry gouache. Changzi took the oil paper bag curiously and found that it was still warm. After opening it, there were 2 cakes inside, which smelled very fragrant. She handed one of the cakes to Qin Xiao. "You can eat one too." Qin Xiao said, "You can eat it?" When Changzi saw that Qin Xiao didn't accept it, he directly put the cake into his hand. "It will be delicious if we eat it together." Qin Xiao looked down at the cake in his hand, and then saw Changzi eating the cake in small bites. He felt a little happy. "Are you still angry with me?" Changzi had actually stopped being angry a long time ago. Thinking about it carefully, Qin Xiao was a bit naive and a bit straightforward, so he was naturally straightforward in this matter. She shook her head. "I'm not that stingy." When Qin Xiao learned that she was not angry, the worries of these days disappeared immediately. Concubine Su ate a lot of snacks on the way, and she was not hungry now. Her attention was always on the censor goo. The censor goo kept screaming along the way, which also meant that the man in black was following the honor guard all the way. Tao Liangyuan noticed that Concubine Su kept her head down, and asked worriedly, "Concubine Su, what's wrong with you? Have you lost your appetite?" Concubine Su raised her head and looked at Tao Liangyuan with a guilty conscience. "I'm fine, I'm just not very hungry." Tao Liangyuan asked worriedly, "I found that you were a little distracted along the way and kept lying on the car window. Are you worried? Babies, please support me with monthly tickets. Babies, good evening. Please support me with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 443. Concubine Su felt a little guilty. Did she show it so obviously along the way? Tao Liangyuan saw it all. "I'm just a little homesick, don't worry." Tao Liangyuan smiled and said, "It's okay if nothing happens. It's much more interesting to come out this time than in the palace. I also think it's a pity that we don't know how to ride and shoot, otherwise we could go hunting together." Concubine Su let go of the little bell in excitement. A few crisp sounds made Tao Liangyuan, who was lowering his head to eat, raise his head and glance around suspiciously. "Concubine Su, did you hear something screaming?" Concubine Su grabbed the little bell and held it tightly in the palm of her hand. The crisp scream immediately weakened. She shook her head guiltily. "No. Did I hear it wrong?" Tao Liangyuan looked around and didn't hear the cry, so she ignored it and continued to eat the food in front of her. "I'm going to make a convenience." Concubine Su put down her chopsticks, turned around and trotted out. Seeing that Concubine Su was so anxious, Tao Liangyuan didn't think much about it. Concubine Su walked out of the private room and looked around. Without looking at the man in black, she went down the steps. There was a lot of people going downstairs and there were many guests. She searched around but couldn't find the man in black, so she went to the backyard to solve the physical problem first. After she solved her physical problem, she bumped into a drunk man within a few steps. She frowned in pain. She rubbed her shoulders, raised her head and saw a man with a general belly. "How do you walk?" The drunk man opened his mouth to curse, but when he lowered his head and saw that she was a beauty, he immediately became lustful. "Beauty, does it hurt?" "Master, let me rub it for you," the drunk man said and rushed towards the beauty. When Concubine Su encountered the situation, she hurriedly avoided it and kicked the drunk man in the thigh. The drunk man jumped away and hit the pillar behind him. He turned to look at the beauty. He was not angry and laughed lustfully. "Oh, it's quite wild. It's fun to play like this." Concubine Su knew she couldn't beat the drunkard, so she didn't dare to fight hard, so she turned around and ran away. However, her skirt was too long and she accidentally stepped on it and almost fell down. She hurriedly lifted up her skirt and tried to run. "Help! There are gangsters!" As a result, the drunk man grabbed her wrist and pulled her back before she even took 2 steps. He covered her mouth with his big hand and walked towards the guest room. "Beauty, why are you running away? I promised to make you feel comfortable." Concubine Su was not as strong as the man, so she was almost dragged away. Her face turned pale with fright, and she kept slapping the drunken man's hands with her hands. What an unlucky thing it is to meet a gangster today. Seeing that her innocence was about to be lost, Concubine Su was so frightened that her eyes burst into tears. The drunkard dragged Concubine Su to the guest room. Just as he was about to close the door, a purple figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Before he could see clearly, he felt severe pain in his abdomen and was kicked hard. The drunk man clutched his stomach, his face turned pale, and when he was about to fall, his fleshy face was kicked hard again, and his pig-like body hit the wall. It fell down with a bang, vomited blood, tilted its head and fainted. When the drunk man let go of concubine Sue, she subconsciously hid aside. When she raised her head, she saw a man wearing a black and purple brocade robe standing at the door. The man has long dark hair and a purple gold crown. He has an outstanding figure and extraordinary bearing. When she saw that face clearly, concubine Sue was stunned, with tears hanging on her eyebrows. This was the first time she had seen a man in black wearing anything other than night clothes. He was already handsome, but when he put on the noble purple and black brocade robe, she was stunned. Seeing concubine Sue standing motionless, Jun Wuxian hit him on the head with a folding fan. "Are you scared to death?" Only then did concubine Sue react. No, she looked up and down at the man in black. The saying that a person depends on his clothes was true at all. Wearing night clothes and fancy clothes just felt different. She couldn't help but praise, "You look really good in this outfit." Jun Wuxian chuckled, "I didn't realize that you have a sweet mouth." He looked at concubine Sue up and down, and there were no obvious signs of injury. "Are you okay?" Concubine Sue shook her head, "I'm fine." "You came in time. If it were later, maybe something would happen." Jun Wuxian was also glad that he came in time, otherwise the consequences would be disastrous. "Let's go." Concubine Sue nodded vigorously, "Yes." After leaving the guest room, concubine Sue followed the man in black closely. Looking at the man in black's upright figure, she secretly imagined how the man in black looked in regular clothes. "Now that I have seen him, he is even more handsome and noble than I imagined. He obviously looks like a noble son from a wealthy family, but I really can't figure out why he would wear night clothes and break into the palace." Concubine Sue was thinking, but she didn't expect that the man in black walking in front suddenly stopped, causing her to not react and bump into his back. She said, "Oh," in pain. Jun Wuxian turned around and saw concubine Sue holding her nose. "You don't even look at me when you're walking." Concubine Sue rubbed her nose and stared at the man in black for a long time. The more she looked at him, the more he looked good. When she realized that she had been staring at him, she looked away embarrassedly. "Why are you following me all the time? Aren't you afraid of being discovered?" Jun Wuxian was not surprised that the induction poison was on concubine Sue. "It doesn't count as following. I just happened to be going back, and we were traveling the same way." Concubine Sue thought that the man in black might leave Daxia next month, and she didn't know when they would meet again. "If you leave Daxia, can you come and talk to me?" Jun Wuxian leaned closer to concubine Sue, looking at her reluctant to leave, and jokingly said, "You will make me suspect that you are not willing to let me leave." Concubine Sue's face turned red. Although she felt a little bit reluctant to let go, but when the man in black said it like this, she still replied firmly, "Why can't I let you go? You come and go without a trace, and I can't bear to leave you suddenly. I don't know when we will meet next time." Jun Wuxian nodded thoughtfully, "There's always a banquet in the world, so let's have a little more fun." Not to mention it was okay, but as soon as she mentioned it, concubine Sue suddenly became sad. "That's true, but it still makes me sad when I can't see you suddenly. People have joys and sorrows, and the moon is full and cloudy, but the moon is round twice every month." Concubine Sue raised her head and looked at the man in black. "If you treat me as a friend, you must come back to see me." Jun Wuxian chuckled when he heard this. "You are so domineering at a young age. Do your parents know?" Concubine Sue raised her chin proudly. "Of course I know, my father and mother dote on me." You see, children doted on by their parents don't know the sinister nature of people's hearts and can easily suffer losses. Jun Wuxian then added, "If a domineering and simple girl like you is not clever, it will not be as simple as suffering losses. In this regard, you are far from Xiaju. Although Xiaju is innocent and cute, she is also smart and ordinary people cannot bully her. If it were in the past, She would be very angry if the man in black praised others and said she was stupid. It was different this time. Xiaju was the sister of the man in black, so it was normal for her to praise her sister. Her brother often praises her for being smart. I am protected by my father, so I am not afraid. Jun Wuxian was startled when he heard this. He was naturally not afraid if someone was protecting him. Just like what he said to Xiaju back then, no one would dare to bully you as long as he protects you. However, Xiaju has been missing for so long and has not yet been found. He said he would protect her for the rest of his life but never did it. Concubine Su took the opportunity to ask, "We have known each other for so long, but I still don't know your name. Can you tell me?" Jun Wuxian nodded, "It doesn't matter if I tell you, you can call me Jun Wuxian." Jun Wuxian. Concubine Su thought silently in her heart, he is so handsome, and his name is also so nice. I'm leaving the palace. If you come back later, you don't have to go to the palace to find me. You can go to the general's mansion to find me. Jun Wuxian did not expect that Concubine Su was an activist and would leave the palace as soon as she left the palace. When will you leave the palace? There was a touch of sadness in Concubine Su's eyes. I feel a little reluctant to let go of the Crown Princess and Tao Lianyuan. They will probably leave the palace this year. Jun Wuxian asked again, did Xiao Jinyan agree? Concubine Su nodded, His Highness is a very nice person. I just mentioned it and he agreed immediately. Jun Wuxian snorted, if he was good, there would be no bad people in the world. Concubine Su was having a great time chatting with the handsome guy, but Tao Lianyuan was almost dying of anxiety. After waiting for Concubine Su to come back for a long time, she had no choice but to go out and look for her. After searching around and finding no one, she immediately went to look for Xiao Jinyan. Your Highness, Concubine Su is missing. Xiao Jinyan looked at Tao Lianyuan's panicked expression and asked, why are you missing? Tao Lianyuan briefly recounted what happened. I have been waiting for Concubine Su to come back for a long time. I went out to look around but didn't see anyone. I am worried about Concubine Su. Xiao Jinyan ordered, Qin Xiao, send someone to find him and surround the entire inn. I obey my orders. Qin Xiao led his men to search the inn one by one. Shen Shuwei was extremely worried. Concubine Su is just a paper tiger. She looks fierce on the surface, but is actually very timid. If she were a bad person, she would probably just cry. As expected of having a good time with Concubine Su and knowing Concubine Su very well, that is the fact. Xiao Jinyan comforted her, don't worry, I will get her back as soon as possible. Shen Chu slightly tugged on his sleeve and said, Your Highness, I will follow you to find Concubine Su. Xiao Jinyan nodded, okay. The group of people hurried downstairs. It was already past mealtime, and there were not many guests downstairs. Seeing that something was going on, they ran away before finishing their meal. Shen Shuwei followed Xiao Jinyan to the backyard. Qin Xiao walked over quickly and reported, Master, we found a drunk man who was beaten violently and fell into coma. Xiao Jinyan frowned, go over and take a look. Qin Xiao led the way to the guest room where the accident occurred. The guest room door was damaged due to violence and was barely hanging on the doorframe. There was a drunk man lying on the ground, vomiting blood, and unconscious. Xiao Jinyan ordered, wake people up. Qin Xiao lowered his eyebrows and nodded, I obey. I'll do it, Shen Shuwei said and was about to step forward. She found that her hand was tightly held by someone. She raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyan in confusion, what's wrong? Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at her, Qin Xiao is enough. Shen Shuwei said, but I can make a fainted person wake up instantly, can Qin Xiao do it? Babies, please support me with monthly votes. Good night, babies. Asking for monthly votes and recommendation votes. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 444. Chapter 444. After Xiao Jinyan met Jun Wuxian, protecting his shortcomings, jealous. Xiao Jinyan's eyes paused and looked at Qin Xiao. Qin Xiao shook his head, indicating that he was very embarrassed. This was a fainting, not sleeping, or coma, and he would wake up with a kick. Subordinates, I can't do it. Shen Chuwei pulled Xiao Jinyan's sleeve, and her bright eyes showed a confident light. I can do it, this drunk must have seen concubine Su. Shen Chuwei smelled the familiar scent of perfume as soon as she stepped into the guest room. The perfume that concubine Su used to use had a faint scent of crabapple. As a Chinese medicine practitioner, she was very sensitive to all kinds of scents. Shen Chuwei was also worried about concubine Su, so she was so anxious. Xiao Jinyan frowned, but nodded in agreement considering concubine Su's safety. Shen Chuwei got the order, let go of Xiao Jinyan's sleeve, came to the drunk and squatted down, and she took out a silver needle from her sleeve pocket. Before everyone could react to how Shen Chuwei gave him acupuncture, the drunk woke up. The first thing he said after waking up was, "Please spare my life, dear man." Xiao Jinyan ordered coldly, "Qin Xiao, interrogate him carefully." "I obey your command." Qin Xiao stepped forward, drew out his sword and put it against the drunk's neck. The cold touch and sharp blade could save his life with a little force. The sober drunk found that the purple-clothed man had disappeared, and he breathed a sigh of relief and said ouch a few times. In the midst of the swords and shadows, there was a deadly sword on his neck, and his face, which had not yet recovered, turned a little paler. "Please spare my life, please spare my life. Have you ever seen a woman in green clothes?" Qin Xiao's emotionless voice scared the drunkard and made him nod his head repeatedly. "I've seen her before. I saw she was pretty and wanted to take advantage of her. I didn't even wipe my hands before I was rescued." Qin Xiao asked again, "Who rescued her? Where did she go?" "How would I know? That person was really fierce. He kicked me a few times. I'm afraid my ribs are broken," the drunkard said aggrievedly. "That woman is obviously a prostitute. I'm not unwilling to pay." Before the drunkard finished speaking, Shen Chuwei raised her foot and kicked the drunkard in the ribs. The drunkard wailed and rolled on the ground in pain. Shen Chuwei said angrily, "Breaking a few ribs is a bargain for you." This scene happened so fast that everyone was stunned. Who would have thought that the crown princess, who was always delicate and weak, would kick someone just because of a disagreement? Those muffled sounds just now, those who learn martial arts know that they are the sounds of broken bones. How hard must this kick be to break a person's ribs? Xiao Jinyan was also stunned for a moment. Looking at the fierceness of his little wife's kick just now, he suddenly remembered that 2 years ago, he was kicked by her because he kissed her when he was drunk. Now that he thinks about it, that kick was considered light. Xiao Jinyan took 2 steps forward and pulled Shen Chuwei into his arms. He glanced at the drunk man on the ground with cold eyes without a trace of emotion. "Qin Xiao, take him to the prison." Qin Xiao clasped his fists and accepted the order. "I obey your order." Xiao Jinyan led Shen Chuwei out of the guest room. The drunk man was still wondering why he was imprisoned. After Qin Xiao explained, the drunk man realized that the woman he had just had a bad idea about was the prince's concubine, the legitimate daughter of General Su. Imprisoned in the prison, don't think about getting out in this life. The drunk man regretted it so much that his intestines turned green. The faint fragrance of the crabapple flowers still remained in the air. Shen Chuwei continued to walk forward while smelling the fragrance. Xiao Jinyan looked at Shen Chuwei's actions in confusion. "What are you doing?" Shen Chuwei explained, "I smelled the scent of gouache on concubine Su's body. I smelled the scent of crabapple flowers in the guest room just now." Xiao Jinyan naturally didn't know that the gouache used on concubine Su's body was the scent of crabapple flowers. Even if he knew, he didn't have as good a sense of smell as Shen Chuwei. Is that why you remembered to wake up the drunkard? Shen Shuwei nodded, yes, otherwise why would I waste time waking him up? Xiao Jinyan. Then a little effort is also called a waste of time. Shen Shuwei looked around for someone, and finally saw Concubine Su on the second floor of the inn. Opposite Concubine Su stood a tall man with a purple gold crown and a purple and black brocade robe. Although only the side profile was seen, it can be seen that the man was extremely handsome. Was it this man who saved Concubine Su? Xiao Jinyan noticed Shen Shuwei's move, followed her line of sight, and saw two figures on the second floor. Shen Shuwei thought that Concubine Su was so close to another man. Before Concubine Su left the palace, she was still Xiao Jinyan's concubine in name. Would Xiao Jinyan be angry if he saw it? Xiao Jinyan must not be seen. Shen Shuwei took Xiao Jinyan's hand and was about to find a reason to take him away. When she looked up, she found that Xiao Jinyan was staring at the second floor. She thought it was over. He saw it. Your Highness, don't be angry. I will call Concubine Su over now. Shen Shuwei was afraid that Xiao Jinyan would be angry, so she lifted her skirt and went up to the second floor. Xiao Jinyan. What is he angry about? Shen Shuwei came to the second floor and looked at the man in front of Concubine Su curiously. Jun Wuxian had heard the footsteps of Shen Shuwei when she came up. He curled the corners of his lips and saw that Concubine Su didn't notice anyone approaching at all. I should go now. Concubine Su subconsciously asked, where are you going? Jun Wuxian turned around to look at the person who came and found that it was Shen Shuwei. He was stunned for a moment. Concubine Su tilted her head in confusion, followed Jun Wuxian's line of sight, and saw Shen Shuwei holding up the hem of her skirt as she stepped onto the last staircase. Shen Shuwei was about to put down her skirt when she noticed that the two people opposite her were looking this way, as if they were disturbing someone else's date. When she saw the man's face clearly, she felt familiar, as if she had seen it somewhere. Concubine Su asked in confusion, Princess, why are you here? Shen Chu showed a polite smile, I just came to remind you that it's time for us to hit the road. Later Concubine Su realized that she had been out for a long time, and the crown princess must have come to see her. I'll leave right away. Shen Shuwei came over, leaned against Concubine Su, and whispered, you suddenly disappeared, which shocked us. Concubine Su explained, I didn't disappear, I was almost raped. Fortunately, I came across the story of a hero saving a beauty, otherwise you wouldn't be able to see me. Shen Chu chuckled slightly, then do you want to pledge yourself to me? Concubine Su showed a hint of shyness and said coquettishly, don't talk nonsense, people are watching. Jun Wuxian. Now that you know about my existence, are you still whispering so blatantly? Shen Shuwei secretly took a few glances at the man in purple opposite him. He looked more handsome from the front and looked familiar. Who is he? Concubine Su grabbed her handkerchief and replied, his name is Jun Wuxian. Jun Wuxian gently shook his folding fan and looked at Shen Shuwei with a faint smile, don't you recognize me? Shen Chu blinked his beautiful big eyes twice and looked at Jun Wuxian doubtfully, do we know each other? Jun Wuxian reminded me leisurely, 2 years ago, you gave me a piece of silver at the snack street in Yongqian City. Shen Chu slightly opened her eyes. After Jun Wuxian mentioned it, she also remembered it. She had long forgotten such a short side. Jun Wuxian looked at Shen Shuwei with a half smile, I remember, you call yourself Bai Xiaofei. Shen Chu smiled awkwardly. At that time, she just said casually, who knew we could meet here again? Jun Wuxian added, I didn't expect you to be the current crown princess. When Xiao Jinyan came up, he saw them talking and laughing. He walked over with a sullen face. Shen Shuwei watched Xiao Jinyan walking towards them step by step, and thought to himself, could Xiao Jinyan misunderstand? Xiao Jinyan came over and pulled Shen Shuwei into his arms. How long do you want me to wait? Shen Shuwei was obedient and did not dare to move. She raised her head and Xiao Jinyan explained, "Your Highness, please wait a little while, I and concubine Su will come down." Concubine Su felt extremely guilty when she saw Xiao Jinyan coming. She was afraid that Xiao Jinyan would recognize Jun Wuxian as the man in black that night. What if someone sent someone to arrest Jun Wuxian? Jun Wuxian looked at Xiao Jinyan's actions. His intentions were so obvious that it was difficult for people to ignore them. Looking at concubine Su, who was standing aside, she was left in the cold. Fortunately, she had a high consciousness and wanted to leave the palace, otherwise she would have to live a miserable life. Xiao Jinyan looked at the man in purple in front of him. From his temperament and the calm look on his face, he could guess that he was not an ordinary kid from a rich family. "Who is he?" Concubine Su hurriedly explained, "Your Highness, he is my concubine's savior, his name is Jun Wuxian." Xiao Jinyan also guessed that the man in purple in front of her saved concubine Su, which also showed that the man in front of her was not weak in martial arts. What reward does this knight want for saving concubine Su? Saving people is just a little effort. Just think of it as thanks to the crown princess for giving her money 2 years ago. Jun Wuxian looked at Shen Shuwei with a half smile. "Shen Shuwei, what do you want me to do?" Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at Shen Shuwei after hearing this. 2 years ago, Xiao Ju had already entered the palace. When had he ever interacted with Jun Wuxian? Although I was confused, I didn't ask him in person. Xiao Jinyan said a few polite words and left with Shen Shuwei and concubine Su. Concubine Su frequently looked back at Jun Wuxian. She didn't know if she would see Jun Wuxian after this parting. Shen Shuwei saw concubine Su turn around and looked back at Jun Wuxian, finding him holding a folding fan and waving to them with a smile. Xiao Jinyan noticed that Shen Shuwei was looking back at Jun Wuxian with a sullen face. He reached out to cover her eyes and turned her head. "Don't look at the road when you walk, be careful of falling." Shen Shuwei explained, "I didn't look at Jun Wuxian." To Xiao Jinyan's ears, these words were like saying there were no 300 taels of silver in this place. Concubine Su was startled and quickly looked away, feeling extremely guilty. Before getting on the carriage, Shen Shuwei said to concubine Su, "I have helped you teach that gangster a lesson." Concubine Su asked curiously, "How did you teach me a lesson?" "Broken some of his ribs." Shen Chu's slightly fluttering words made concubine Su reveal her doting eyes. "Princess, you are so powerful." Shen Shuwei was about to say something modest when Xiao Jinyan's deep voice came from behind, "It's time to get on the carriage." When concubine Su saw Xiao Jinyan, it was like a mouse seeing a cat. "I'll go in first." After saying that, she immediately hid in the car. Shen Shuwei followed Xiao Jinyan and got into the carriage obediently. Sichuan ate a fish and licked his paws with satisfaction. Xiaobai just drank goat's milk, imitated the snowball, and licked his little paws in a decent manner. Shen Shuwei felt a little sleepy after eating and drinking. As she was getting ready to lie down, she noticed that Xiao Jinyan had been staring at her. "I ate pork elbows in sauce today, will it get on my face?" She touched her face. It didn't feel greasy, but rather smooth and delicate. "Your Highness, what's wrong with you?" Xiao Jinyan thought of the meaningful look Jun Wuxian gave Shen Shuwei just now. How did you and Jun Wuxian know each other? My dears, have a happy Dragon Boat Festival. Please support with monthly tickets. My dears, have a happy Dragon Boat Festival. Please support with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 445. Shen Shuwei said, "We just met on the street, what's wrong?" Xiao Jinyan asked in a deep voice, "Why didn't you tell me about it?" Shen Shuwei asked in confusion, "I just met someone on the road, why did you tell His Highness?" Xiao Jinyan frowned when she saw that she was speaking as a matter of course. "Look at Jun Wuxian's clothes, everything is the dress of a nobleman, how could he lack a silver ingot from you? I can tell at a glance that he has a plan. Xiao Jinyan's face was as cold as ice, but every time he spoke to her, he was still a little gentle. Today he was so fierce that Shen Shuwei was stunned for a while. I still remember that he wanted the candied haws in my hand. A grown man couldn't even afford to buy candied haws. Isn't it because he didn't have money? Xiao Jinyan asked, did you give it to him? Shen Shuwei shook her head, I brought it back to His Highness, and His Highness even complained that the candied haws were too sweet. Xiao Jinyan felt better after hearing this, and knew to bring it back for him to eat, but did he ever complain that the candied haws were too sweet? I think Jun Wuxian is approaching you and concubine Su for ulterior motives. Shen Shuwei reminded, I have only met Jun Wuxian twice, what could be his purpose? Xiao Jinyan raised his eyebrows, you don't believe me? Shen Shuwei said, of course I believe your highness. Xiao Jinyan showed a satisfied expression. Seeing concubine Su's reaction today, she always felt that concubine Su and Jun Wuxian were not meeting for the first time. Seeing her reluctant look, they must have known each other for a long time. And Jun Wuxian's eyes, I always felt that I had seen him somewhere. Xiao Jinyan pondered for a long time and couldn't figure it out. When he lowered his head, he found that Xiaju was sleeping on his legs. It's true that eating and drinking is enough to sleep. Xiao Jinyan adjusted a comfortable posture for her. Looking at her sleeping appearance, he felt relieved. Arriving at the palace was the next morning. As soon as Shen Shuwei returned to the East Palace, he immediately let go of Xiao Jinyan's hand and ran all the way into the Hehuan Palace. Xiao Jinyan looked at Xiaju's impatient look. He missed her so much after not seeing her for a few days. He had been leading troops away for half a year, and he was eager to go home, but she was not so impatient to see him. He was not as good as the two kids. Xiao Jinyan felt sadder and sadder as he thought about it. At this time, the two little guys were holding the fence and trying to climb out. Baby, your mother is back. Shen Shuwei's affectionate call successfully attracted the attention of the two little guys who were about to climb over the fence. Even though they hadn't seen each other for several days, they knew Shen Shuwei. Susu happily reached out for a hug, Mommy, Mommy. Shen Shuwei picked up her daughter and kissed her on her pink cheek. Susu baby. Susu danced happily, hugged Shen Shuwei's neck tightly, and smiled happily. When Xiao Jinyan came in, he saw this scene. A warm feeling welled up in his eyes. Seeing Dao Tao raising her little head to look at Shen Shuwei and Susu, he walked over and picked Dao Tao up. Daddy, Daddy. Dao Tao happily called Daddy. Xiao Jinyan looked at his son's happy look, and suddenly thought of himself when he was a child, he should have been so happy. The wet nurses standing by and watching also laughed, the young masters are very happy to see His Highness and the Crown Princess. Xiao Jinyan looked up at the wet nurses, I and the Crown Princess are not in the palace, did they cry? To reply to His Highness, the young masters are very well behaved and did not cry, but the young masters are even happier that His Highness and the Crown Princess are back, the wet nurse replied with a smile. Shen Shuwei heard this and looked at Susu hugging her neck and not letting go. She looked so clingy. She must have missed her too much after not seeing her for a few days. I haven't seen you for a few days. Susu misses me so much. She is indeed my little cotton padded jacket. Xiao Jinyan slightly raised the corner of his lips. He had heard of little cotton padded jacket, little vest, and little lover in the previous life. This was the first time he heard from Xiaju that his children had so many names, and the names were very interesting. After leaving the palace for a few days, a lot of official business had piled up. Xiao Jinyan hugged Dao Tao for a while and then left the Hehuan Palace. At this time, Swichuan came in from outside the house with Xiaobai, who was also Snow White. When he came, he immediately attracted the attention of Susu and Dao Tao. Swichuan brought Xiaobai to Susu, and as soon as he let go of his mouth, Xiaobai fell down. Coming to a strange place, Xiaobai was so scared that he didn't dare to move. Susu reached out and grabbed Xiaobai's tail, dragged it in front of her, and then hugged it. How could Xiaobai have received such a warm hug? For a moment, he looked at Suichuan opposite him in a daze. If he could speak, he might howl, "Brother, save me." Chengzi has known Xiaobai is a tiger since he knew that he was a tiger. I was always worried every day. Master, this is the first time Xiaobai has seen Susu. What if he scratches Susu? Shen Chuwei drank tea calmly. Don't worry, Xiaobai won't hurt the baby. Chengzi looked at Susu holding Xiaobai when she heard this. Every time she saw Xiaobai open his mouth, she was scared. After several times, Xiaobai didn't bite Susu, so she was relieved. Chang Liangyuan learned that His Highness had returned, so she brought the cakes she made herself to the study. Xiao Jinyan was reviewing memorials. Chang Liangyuan walked in slowly and bowed to Xiao Jinyan, "Your Highness, I wish you good health." Xiao Jinyan looked up and glanced at Chang Liangyuan. "What's the matter with Chang Liangyuan?" Chang Liangyuan came over with a food box and put it on the desk. She opened the food box, took out the cakes inside and put them on the desk. "Your Highness, I made the cakes myself, please try them." Xiao Jinyan said without raising her head, "Next time, you don't have to go there in person, just let the maid bring it over." Chang Liangyuan felt a little dissatisfied when she heard this, but she could show it. She just said in a gentle voice, "I haven't seen your Highness for a long time. It's just right for me to come here to pay my respects to your Highness." Xiao Jinyan raised her head, took a memorial and continued to read it, and said lightly, "I heard that Chang Liangyuan often went to the Empress Dowager to show her filial piety." Chang Liangyuan was secretly happy that her decision was right. Xiao Jinyan actually noticed her. He must think that she is a very filial person. "I like to talk and chat with the Empress Dowager. I'm free, so I just go to see her every day. I'm busy with official duties all day and don't have time to visit the Empress Dowager. Then I'll trouble Chang Liangyuan to accompany the Empress Dowager more on my behalf and show my filial piety on my behalf." Xiao Jinyan paused here and continued, "I heard that the Empress Dowager likes the Diamond Sutra. Please copy a copy for me and give it to the Empress Dowager." Chang Liangyuan's face looked a little unhappy when she heard this. She was asked to copy the Diamond Sutra? And spend more time with the Empress Dowager every day? Xiao Jinyan raised his eyebrows with anger. "Why, you don't want to?" Chang Liangyuan lowered her eyes. No matter how unhappy she was, she could only nod in response. "I am willing to be filial to your Highness." Xiao Jinyan retracted his gaze, "Then go." "Yes, your Highness." Chang Liangyuan left the study. After leaving the study, Chang Liangyuan was so angry that she had no place to vent, so she could only go back to her Zinlan palace to vent her anger. After finally copying the Diamond Sutra and sending it to the Queen Mother, it was rainy and snowy, and she accidentally fell, and the copied scriptures all rolled into the water, the ink spread, and the words were not in shape. Huaixiang stepped forward to help Chang Liangyuan up, and said worriedly, "My lady, are you okay?" Chang Liangyuan stared at the paper full of words in the water, and the more she thought about it, the more unwilling she was, and she had to go back to continue copying. Back in Zinlan Palace, Chang Liangyuan had a tantrum, and the ground was a mess. Chang Liangyuan's hair was also a little messy, and she had long lost her gentle and elegant image in the past. Xiao Jinyu's marriage has been delayed, and the baby's 1-year-old birthday has arrived in the blink of an eye. The emperor was happy and held a banquet. All the civil and military officials came to congratulate. "The two little guys can already walk. If you are not careful, they will walk out and make it difficult for you to find them. The palace is busy because of the 1-year-old banquet." Shen Chuwei has been thinking about the banquet. Chengzi ran all the way in, panting and said, "Master, Susu is missing." Shen Chuwei was preparing birthday gifts for the babies. When she heard that the baby was missing, she couldn't help but feel a little anxious. How could it be missing? Changzi said, I just went in to put new clothes on Susu, but I didn't see Susu on the bed. The nurses have gone to look for her. Good night. Babies, please support with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Iyun Si. Chapter 446. Inside the Golden Palace. The emperor sat high on the dragon throne, listening to the fierce debate of the censors for half an hour, and he felt a headache. Today is Susu's first birthday party, a group of officials who have no sense of taste. Isn't this delaying the time of the court? Just when the censors were talking endlessly, the emperor angrily slammed the dragon case, frightening the censors so much that they trembled and dared not breathe. Outside the Golden Palace, a small pink figure was lying on the danbai, with two small tufts on her head, and two small white balls of hair hanging on the tufts, climbing up with her flexible limbs. Since Susu could walk, the small Hehuan palace could no longer hold her. Swichuan took her, no, she took Swichuan to the Golden Palace. The road was smooth, because everyone in the palace knew that Susu was the emperor's darling and could go in and out at will. The guards were scared to death when they saw the little ancestor climbing the 100-step ladder. Should we carry the little ancestor up? What if the little ancestor cries? Susu is not shy and anyone can carry her. Last time, they were the ones who were doing the work. When they saw the little ancestor running out of the East Palace, they went up to carry her and tried to send her back. As a result, the little ancestor cried loudly. Xiaobai and Swichuan followed Susu all the time, fearing that the little ancestor would accidentally step on the air, so that they could catch her. After Susu climbed up, she patted her knees with her little hands and walked towards the Golden Palace with her two short legs. Xiaobai was stopped by Swichuan just after taking 2 steps. Xiaobai was 4 months old and more than twice the size of Swichuan. With a look from Swichuan, Xiaobai understood what he meant. It couldn't follow the little ancestor in. Susu held the door frame with her 2 white and tender little hands, and her big eyes flickered and curiously stared at the people in the room. She didn't smile until she saw the emperor on the dragon throne, and stepped over the threshold with her short legs to go in. It was quiet in the Golden Palace. Susu held the small ball of fur on her cotton coat with one hand, and looked at the ministers on both sides curiously while walking. The ministers all lowered their eyebrows and eyes, and saw a small figure in the center of the palace, walking towards them step by step. Who doesn't know the emperor's beloved granddaughter, who was playing with the jade seal when she was 3 months old? The Golden Palace is a place for discussing national affairs. How can she come and go at will even if she is favored? The emperor was furious, and the emperor's granddaughter came at the wrong time. Susu didn't know what the civil and military officials thought. She tilted her head and looked at the adults curiously, looking down and silent, and then looked at the emperor grandfather on the dragon throne, and she ran over happily. Eunuch Li saw Susu and hurriedly reminded the emperor, "Your Majesty, the princess is here." The emperor was drinking the fire-reducing tea brought by Eunuch Li when he heard that Susu was here. He didn't believe it. Susu was in the East Palace, and this place was quite far from the East Palace. He looked up and saw a pink little figure in the center of the hall, and was stunned. He watched the pink little figure walk up the golden steps step by step. The emperor handed the teacup to Eunuch Li, stood up and strode over, bent down, and picked up Susu. Susu happily hugged the emperor's neck and called in a baby voice, "Grandpa, Grandpa." The 2 words Grandpa were learned by Susu recently. The 3 words Grandpa were a bit difficult, but the 2 words Grandpa were relatively easy. The emperor laughed happily when he heard Susu calling him Grandpa. Hearing the emperor's laughter, the civil and military officials below were confused, and they also saw that the emperor changed his face faster than turning a book. He was still furious a second ago, but now he laughed heartily. Dismiss the court. The emperor was happy, left 2 words, and walked out of the golden palace with Susu in his arms. When the emperor saw the white tiger and Swichuan at the door, he frowned. Swichuan was fine, but he was not afraid of a cat if he kept it well. However, it was outrageous for Susu to keep a white tiger as a pet. In 2 or 3 months, the size will double. What if Susu gets hurt? Susu saw Xiaobai and waved her hands at it, hoo hoo. This was not the first time the emperor heard Susu call the white tiger hoo. He corrected her in a gentle voice, Susu, it's hoo, white tiger. Susu tilted her head and repeated in a baby voice, hoo, grandpa, hoo. The emperor laughed when he heard this. The crown princess said that it was normal for children to have some inaccurate pronunciation of words when they were young, and it would be fine when they were older, so she didn't continue to correct them. Will the emperor grandpa take you to see the emperor grandma? Susu heard that the emperor grandma was so excited, nai. Grandma's pronunciation was not as easy as grandpa's. Susu, who was only 1 year old, didn't pronounce the words clearly, so the emperor let her go and walked towards Fenji Palace with Susu in his arms and legs. Xiaobai immediately followed. Swichuan turned around and went back to the East Palace. At this time, Hehuan Palace. Shen Shuwei led people to search Hehuan Palace but did not see Susu, so they could only expand the scope to the entire East Palace. The guards and maids in the East Palace searched one by one, and also alarmed the ladies in other palaces. Chang Liangyuan was walking outside, and saw the panic of the people in the palace, and asked Huaixiang, what's going on outside? Such a big commotion. Huaixiang said, I heard that the little princess is missing, and everyone is looking for her. Chang Liangyuan smiled when she heard that the little princess was missing. A 1-year-old child is so wild, I don't know why the emperor and the queen like her so much. I heard that the emperor has always hoped to have a princess, but the concubines were not pregnant, and the crown princess gave birth to a little princess. The emperor is naturally happy to have a granddaughter, Huaixiang guessed. Chang Liangyuan was very unwilling to hear this. She had been in the palace for so long but had not served in the emperor's bed, and the emperor and empress did not ask. If she served in the emperor's bed, she would definitely give birth to a son and a daughter. It's a good deal for the crown princess. My lady, the most important thing for us now is to serve in the emperor's bed. Only by serving in the emperor's bed can we have the opportunity to be honored by the sun, Huaixiang reminded. Of course I know the importance of serving in the emperor's bed, but His Highness will not come. Chang Liangyuan said this, thinking that the method her mother said was useless for Xiao Jinyan, so she could only think of other ways. Shen Shuwei led people to look around, but did not find Susu, but found Dao Tao in the study. Dao Tao stood on the chair, holding a red brush and writing and drawing, and looked very professional. Shen Shuwei looked at it and couldn't help but sigh. It was indeed Xiao Jinyan's son. He was so diligent at the age of 1. When she walked to the desk and saw what Dao Tao had drawn, she thought it was over, Dao Tao was in trouble. Let's not talk about what the ghost painting Dao Tao drew was, the important thing was the paper. The paper Dao Tao wrote on was a painting, and it was given by someone else. Xiao Jinyan also praised this painting in front of her, which means that he likes it very much. Dao Tao saw Shen Shuwei coming, holding the red brush in her hand, smiling happily, Mom. Shen Shuwei looked at her baby son and smiled so happily, and told him a fact. Baby, you are done. Dao Tao stared at Shen Shuwei in confusion, not understanding the meaning of the sentence at all. Shen Shuwei took her son down, took the red brush from his hand, put it back in place, and looked at the painting again. Even if she had the ability to reach the sky, she couldn't restore the painting to its original state. She rolled up the scroll and complained, You are so old, and you don't put away the painting after you finish looking at it. If you hang it on the wall, it won't be destroyed by your son. Dao Tao learned very quickly, and learned a word in one sentence: Mom, destroy it. Shen Shuwei was amused. Don't worry, your mother will protect you. She didn't know how to make Xiao Jinyan calm down. After cleaning up, Shen Shuwei took her son to wash his hands. Chengzi came trotting over at this time. Master, Swichuan is back, and I didn't see Susu and Xiaobai. Shen Shuwei knew that Swichuan and Xiaobai almost never left Susu for 12 hours, and their sudden disappearance must be the disappearance of all three of them. Swichuan is back, which means that Susu has found the person she is looking for, and she can rest assured. Last time, Susu ran to find Xiao Jinyan by herself. I don't know who Susu went to find today. Shen Shuwei returned to Hehuan Palace with her son in her arms. Xiao Jinyan came back from outside the palace as soon as she entered. Seeing her holding her son, he said, Dao Tao is already 1 year old, don't hold him all the time. Although Shen Shuwei didn't like to hold her son, he was 1 year old and weighed a lot, and it was tiring to hold him all the way back. But she questioned Xiao Jinyan's words. He is only 1 year old, why can't he be held? Xiao Jinyan felt that if a boy was always held, he would look very delicate and rely on Shen Shuwei for everything. When would he be able to stand on his own? This certainly couldn't be said to Shen Shuwei. Dao Tao is 1 year old and weighs more than 20 kilograms. Aren't you tired of holding her all the time? Shen Shuwei felt warm in her heart. Her husband still cared about her. Your Highness is right. Xiao Jinyan took Dao Tao from her arms and turned around to put her on the ground. Dao Tao looked at Xiao Jinyan with a puzzled look. Xiao Jinyan glanced inside the room and didn't see Susu. Where's Susu? The birthday party is about to start. Shen Shuwei shrugged. Susu ran out by herself. I don't know if she went to find her father or mother, or maybe she went to find her uncle. Xiao Jinyan has seen Susu's ability to find people. When he was in the meeting room, Susu could find him, and she brought Xiaobai and Swichuan with her. I don't know who Susu looks like, she loves running around so much. Shen Shuwei said, I don't like running around, how comfortable it is to lie down after eating and drinking. Xiao Jinyan looked at Shen Shuwei, I don't think you are like this. At this time, Qingying came in and bowed to them, Your Highness, Crown Princess. Shen Shuwei asked, Is there anything for Madame Qingying? Qingying said gently, The Queen asked me to come and get Susu's new clothes. Shen Shuwei was a little surprised, so Susu went to find her mother. Qingying smiled and shook her head. Susu went to the Golden Palace to find the Emperor, and the Emperor carried Susu to find the Queen. Xiao Jinyan. Shen Shuwei. How far is the East Palace from the Golden Palace? Susu actually walked such a long way to find Grandpa Huang, which is enough to show how much the Emperor loves Susu, so Susu took the initiative to find him. Because the Emperor took Susu to the Golden Palace several times. Shen Shuwei asked Chengzi to get Susu's new clothes for Madame Qingying. After Qingying left, Shen Shuwei and Xiao Jinyan dressed up and took Dao Tao to attend the 1 year old banquet. When they went, the things for the 1 year old celebration were already prepared. The Emperor came first with Susu and the Queen. The Queen saw Shen Shuwei coming and waved to her happily, Crown Princess, come quickly, bring Dao Tao here, let Dao Tao and Susu celebrate the 1 year old celebration together. Shen Shuwei stepped forward and bowed, Mother. Xiao Jinyan came to the Emperor and put the 2 babies on the table with him. Shen Shuwei took a box of strawberry cake from Chengzi and put it in the middle of a pile of items. Xiao Jinyan looked at the box of strawberry cake and asked Shen Shuwei, why put strawberry cake? Shen Shuwei explained, this is called not worrying about food and clothing. Xiao Jinyan. As a future princess, are you still afraid of having nothing to eat or wear? The Queen looked at the 2 little babies without any hurry. You can start now. But the emperor said, wait, I also want to put something. Good evening, babies. Please support with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 447. Chapter 447 shocked everyone. Shen Shuwei did something extraordinary. The surroundings are full of civil and military officials, and I am more curious about what items the emperor will put for the babies to catch their babies. Shen Shuwei and Xiao Jinyan turned their heads and looked over with curiosity in their eyes. Even the queen couldn't help but be curious, raised her head and asked, what does the emperor want to put in? The emperor gave it a try first, the queen will know later. The less the emperor talks about it, the more curious the queen becomes. The dog emperor knows how to tell the truth. It's been almost 4 months since the last time I talked about the secret between him and his concubines, and the dog emperor didn't say anything. She was so angry. At this time, Eunuch Li came over holding a golden box and said, Your Majesty, the things are here. The emperor ordered, give it to me. Eunuch Li bowed his body and offered it with both hands. Everyone looked at the item in Eunuch Li's hand, and immediately recognized that it was the box containing the jade seal. It goes without saying that the item the emperor wanted to put was the jade seal. Everyone present was shocked. It was the first time that the emperor actually used the jade seal as an item to arrest Zhou. The emperor opened the box, took out the jade seal and placed it among the items, and then looked at Dao Tao and Susu opposite with a smile. This is the jade seal. Whoever picks it up will be rewarded by me. Since the emperor has put everything away, I will also put something away, the queen said, calling Qingying to take off the phoenix crown for herself and put it in the middle. The phoenix crown also represents a symbol of power and status. The workmanship is complicated and the phoenix can only be worn by the queen with her noble status. The emperor looked at the phoenix crown and asked the queen, what does it mean when you put the phoenix crown on it? The queen raised her chin and replied, this is called Feng Yu Jushan. The emperor nodded in agreement, the meaning is good. Our grandchildren should have such courage. Shen Shuwei looked at the pile of items, and the most eye-catching ones were the crystal-clear jade seal and the phoenix crown inlaid with precious gems. Are these expectations too high? She looked at the strawberry cake she made by herself. If her sons and daughters were like her, eating, drinking, and sleeping too much, wouldn't they be living up to the expectations of the emperor and empress? Xiao Jinyu appeared from behind and chuckled twice, since my father, the emperor, and my mother have let go, I don't mind if I, my uncle, put away an item. The emperor knew that his son never took the usual path, and he did the same with items. Why are you joining in the fun? As long as my father can take it, why don't I allow my children to take it? Xiao Jinyu has never been afraid of the emperor. He took out a wooden sword from his arms and placed it between the jade seal and the phoenix crown. Then he looked at Dao Tao with a smile and said, Dao Tao, remember to hold the sword. Emperor. Queen. I knew this kid couldn't come up with anything decent. Chang Liangyuan, who was standing not far away, saw this scene and couldn't help the jealousy in her heart. Why should Shen Shuwei's 2 children be so popular? Even my aunt seemed to have changed. Seeing Shen Shuwei standing next to Xiao Jinyan with such a proud smile, I felt extremely unbalanced. Everything clearly belonged to her, but it was taken away by Shen Shuwei. How could she not hate it? The Queen Mother came late with the support of Wan Xian and saw the scene just now. This was the first time she had seen such grace. Dao Tao and Susu are indeed very popular, and it's no wonder that the Emperor and Queen like them. Wan Xian looked at the scene in front of her and looked at Xiao Jinyan and Shen Shuwei. She was somewhat glad that she had made the choice at that time and did not follow the Queen Mother's wishes and become Xiao Jinyan's concubine. For a dedicated person like Xiao Jinyan, it is difficult for a third person to blend in. She glanced at Chang Liangyuan. As the queen's niece and General Chang's legitimate daughter, she was equally favored and stayed alone in the empty room. She only has the support of the queen mother, so she might not be as good as Chang Liangyuan if she enters the East Palace. She looked at Xiao Jinyu again and saw that he was taking Miss Han with him. It would be better to marry Xiao Jinyu than Xiao Jinyan. The emperor saw the queen mother coming and brought a group of people to pay her respects. Mother came at the right time. The queen mother smiled and said, "You continue, the AI family will just watch the excitement from the side." The emperor still invited the queen mother to the front, glanced at the items in front of him, and wanted to know which one Dao Tao and Susu would take. "Dao Tao, Susu, come here quickly." As early as when Dao Tao and Susu were placed on the table, the two babies couldn't help but want to crawl over, but they were stopped by two little eunuchs. At this moment, the little eunuch listened to the emperor's words. After letting go of them, Dao Tao and Susu crawled towards the pile of items. The emperor and queen kept staring at the little ones, hoping that they could hold the jade seal and phoenix crown. Shen Shuwei is different. She is very much looking forward to the strawberry cake for her babies. "Baby, the strawberry cake is good." After a while, Dao Tao and Susu crawled to a pile of items. The four treasures of the study are placed at the front: pen, ink, paper, and inkstone, followed by books, gold, silver, and jewelry. Susu saw the strawberry cake, reached out and picked it up, put it into her mouth unceremoniously and took a bite. With 8 teeth, she could easily eat the soft cake. Shen Shuwei happily grabbed Xiao Jinyan's hand and said excitedly, "The first one Susu took was the strawberry cake." Xiao Jinyan said helplessly, "Susu's greedy temperament is proven." Shen Shuwei looked at Susu eating the strawberry cake. The look was incredible. She said indifferently, "What's wrong with being greedy?" The way Xiao Jinyan looked at Susu eating was like a miniature version of Xiaoju, especially the look in his eyes when he saw the delicious food. "Of course there's nothing wrong with it." Susu was the first to take the strawberry cake. The emperor and queen were not disappointed but smiled. "The way Susu eats is so cute. You also know how to lick your fingers." Susu is holding a strawberry cake. Although it is not big, it is a bit big for a 1-year-old baby. It is inevitable that her hands will be covered with cream. After eating, if she sees cream on her hands, she will put it to her mouth. Licking it. Then the palace maid took a wet handkerchief and wiped Susu's mouth clean with her little hands. Here, Dao Tao picked up the ink pen and played with it. With the other hand, she touched the four treasures of the study one by one. When she saw the Daomu sword, she picked it up curiously and played with it for a while. Xiao Jinyu was so excited when he saw Dao Tao picking up the Daomu sword. Dao Tao has a discerning eye, and this is a polished Daomu sword. Miss Han. Xiao Jinyan. Shen Shuwei. Emperor. Queen. After Susu finished eating the strawberry cake, she saw Yuxi. She crawled over and touched Yuxi with her fleshy little hands, because she had played with it before, but she lacked interest in playing with it again. Her eyes finally looked at the ruby on the phoenix crown. She had always been interested in bright colors. She held the phoenix crown on her lap with both hands, stared at the ruby, and clasped it with her little hands. The queen saw it and said excitedly, "Susu has great vision and will become a great person in the future." Shen Shuwei. It would be difficult for a mother with such strong genes to become a great person. Susu held the phoenix crown and raised her head to look at the queen. She stood up with her little hands on the table and walked towards the queen. The queen saw Susu's behavior curiously, and when she came closer, she happily hugged Susu. Susu raised the phoenix crown in her hand and placed it on the queen's head, saying in a sweet voice, "Nana, Nana." Susu would see the queen almost every day, and she would see the queen wearing a phoenix crown, so when she saw the phoenix crown, she naturally felt that it should be on the queen's head. The emperor saw this and enthusiastically stretched out his hand to help Susu put the phoenix crown on the queen's head again. Susu is so sensible. She even knows how to wear a phoenix crown for Grandma Huang. The queen laughed happily when she saw Susu's behavior. Susu is awesome. When everyone's attention was on Susu, Dao Tao held the pen sword in one hand and touched the jade seal with the other hand. The jade seal was in the form of a lifelike unicorn with a smooth surface that made people addicted to it. Dao Tao stared at Kylin, her eyes full of curiosity. Xiao Jinyu saw Dao Tao playing with the jade seal and said, "Dao Tao seems to like the jade seal too." When the emperor heard this, he looked back at Dao Tao and saw that he was playing with the jade seal. To be precise, he was playing with the shape of the jade seal, Kylin. Dao Tao holds a pen and a sword in one hand, and a jade seal in the other. She is both civil and military, and has power in her hands. She will become a great weapon in the future. Only the emperor dares to say such things and can say it differently. In other words, he is someone who covets the throne. Even Xiao Jinyan didn't dare to say such words. At the first year banquet, it took a lot of time to catch Zhou, and the next step was to sit down, which was also Shen Shui's favorite part. Dao Tao and Susu were by the side of the emperor and empress at this time. Their greatest pleasure was to play with Dao Tao and Susu, and naturally they would be even more happy to have a meal together. Without the babies around, Shen Shui cooked rice as fast as usual. Xiao Jinyan looked at Shen Shui's mouth that hadn't stopped opening since he sat down, with a smile on his face and eyes, and he was eating extremely happily. This was probably a happiness that he could not experience. Concubine Yun Gui and concubine De Gui looked at Dao Tao and Susu beside the emperor, feeling extremely jealous. Such honor and favor is something their grandson has never received before. Whether it is the full moon banquet or the first year banquet, it has never been so grand. Now, the queen often takes Dao Tao and Susu out to play, and they avoid her when they see her. After all, how can a grandson compare to someone else's twins? The treasure in the emperor's palm. Since we can't compare, we must hide away. After the birthday party, Dao Tao and Susu were already sleepy, so the nannies took them back to take a nap. Xiao Jinyan and Shen Shui returned to the East Palace. "I'm going to the study to handle some things, and you're going to take a nap as well." Xiao Jinyan knew that Xiaju liked to lie down after eating and drinking. It would be nap time, so she would definitely take a nap. When Shen Shui heard about the study, he thought of the painting destroyed by his son. If Xiao Jinyan found out that the painting was destroyed, would he be angry? She grabbed Xiao Jinyan, who was about to leave, and said, "Your Highness, I am not sleepy now. Can I go to the study with you?" When his wife said this, Xiao Jinyan naturally would not refuse. "Okay." The two of them walked into the study one after another. Lu 11 brought 2 cups of freshly brewed tea and placed them on the desk before exiting. Xiao Jinyan came to the desk and found that the painting he had placed on the desk before leaving was missing. Shen Shui saw Xiao Jinyan staring at the bookcase. He had such a good memory, he must have noticed that the calligraphy and painting were missing. In her haste, she stepped forward and took Xiao Jinyan's hand. "Your Highness, please give me a hug." Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at his beloved wife. "Now. Good night, babies. Please support with monthly votes and recommendation votes. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 448. Chapter 448. It's you who took advantage after Xiaju was disliked by His Highness. Shen Shui held Xiao Jinyan's hand tightly and said in an extremely serious tone, "Of course, isn't it now tomorrow? The most important thing now is to divert her attention. After hugging her, she can continue to change the topic. As you ask and I answer, she may forget about calligraphy and painting." It was rare for Xiaoju to take such initiative. Xiao Jinyan was not happy enough, so how could he refuse? It's up to you." When Shen Shui heard this, she opened her arms generously, waiting for Xiao Jinyan to hug her so that she could say the next lines. Xiao Jinyan looked calm on the surface, but he was extremely excited in his heart. He bent down and picked up Xiaju, turned around and walked towards the bed behind the screen. The sudden princess hug made Shen Chu stunned for a moment. A princess hug is okay. Her two hands that were still in the air were silently wrapped around Xiao Jinyan's neck, and she stared at Xiao Jinyan without blinking. Your Highness, do you think I am a concubine? Shen Chuwei's eyes were full of affection in Xiao Jinyan's eyes. It's not heavy, it seems a little lighter. Shen Chuwei was secretly glad that the tacit understanding between husband and wife had improved a lot, and Xiao Jinyan knew what she wanted and answered the question. It seems that I need to eat more every day. I can't let His Highness dislike it. Xiao Jinyan asked doubtfully, why do I dislike it? Shen Chuwei explained, didn't His Highness say that he likes my concubine to be voluptuous? She won't be voluptuous anymore if she loses weight. Every time in bed, Xiao Jinyan said that her waist was so slender that it seemed like she could cut it off with one hand. When I was holding her, I told her that she was too thin and that it would be better if she gained some weight and had more flesh. When Xiao Jinyan heard this, his eyes moved down from her face, looking at her inch by inch. He knew Xiaju's figure very well. Although she was light in weight, her flesh was where it should be, and her waist was too slim to hold. Soft as if there were no bones. Of course, if the meat is longer and rounder, it will feel better. I don't dislike it at all. It's fine with you no matter what. Shen Chuwei said, Your Highness may sound good now, but you may not be sure in the future. I am not a man of sweet words. Xiao Jinyan carried her to the bed, laid her flat on the bed, reached her waist with his hands, and easily untied her belt. Shen Chuwei found that the atmosphere was a bit ambiguous. Xiao Jinyan's behavior was too familiar, and he just wanted to do this to her. In broad daylight. Xiaju. Shen Chu raised his head slightly and found Xiao Jinyan looking down at him, but his hand showed no intention of stopping. After being married for so long, Xiao Jinyan knows her body very well and understands her sensitive points even more clearly. It was easy to make her emotional. Outside the door, Chang Liangyuan and her maid came to the door of the study carrying hangover soup, but were stopped by Lu 11. Chang Liangyuan, His Highness is busy at the moment. If you have anything to tell me, please let me know. Chang Liangyuan pointed to the sobering soup in Hui Xiang's hand and said, Today is the Emperor's grandson's first birthday party. I saw that His Highness drank a lot of wine, so I brought sobering soup. It won't waste much time. Please spread the word to Eunuch Lu. One sound. Lu 11 glanced at the hangover soup in Hui Xiang's hand, and said with a kind face, The Crown Princess is inside right now. His Highness and the Crown Princess are in a harmonious relationship. It is not appropriate for Chang Liangyuan to go in and disturb her at this time. The words are very clear. At this time, His Highness and the Crown Princess are in love. Who dares to go in and ruin His Highness's good deeds? Chang Liangyuan was stunned for a moment, then raised her head and looked at the closed carved door of the study, and realized the meaning of Lu 11's words. In the clear day, he actually came to the study to seduce Xiao Jinyan. What a good trick! Chang Liangyuan looked back and said, In that case, I will go back. Lu 11 smiled and said, Chang Liangyuan, walk slowly. Chang Liangyuan's face changed immediately after she turned around. Xiao Jinyan had drunk wine, and anyone who got close to him at this moment might sleep with him. In order to dominate Xiao Jinyan, Shen Chuwei really didn't miss any chance. Hui Xiang advised in a low voice, Master, don't be angry, we still have a chance. Chang Liangyuan suppressed the jealousy in her heart and said, My aunt's birthday is coming, it's a good opportunity. Asterisk. Every time Shen Chuwei looked at Xiao Jinyan's handsome face, she felt that the biggest advantage she had gained by traveling through time was that she had a good-looking and dedicated husband. It would be better if it stays the same for a lifetime. Shen Chu moved his arm slightly and took the initiative to put his arms around Xiao Jinyan's neck, raised his head and kissed him. When the love is deep, a French kiss can best enhance the atmosphere at this time. Now, let alone Xiao Jinyan not remembering the painting, even Shen Chuwei had forgotten her original intention of letting Xiao Jinyan hug her. An hour later, Shen Chu fell into a deep sleep. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and stared at the sleeping person for a long time. His eyes fell on her eyelashes. There were still crystal clear tears hanging on her long eyelashes. Every time he heard her humming like a kitten, he would be extremely excited. He stretched out his slender fingers to wipe the tears from the corners of her eyes, then stood up, covered her with a quilt, picked up the clothes and put them on slowly. After getting dressed, he turned around and came to the book desk in front of the screen. He looked at the empty book desk, then turned and glanced at the bookshelf behind him. He saw an unopened scroll hanging on the wall next to the bookshelf. Just by looking at it, he recognized it as a painting he had seen before leaving. He walked over, took down the painting, then returned to the desk, put the scroll on it, opened it bit by bit, and saw several dropping ink. His eyes paused. He opened the scroll completely and drew more than a few drops of ink, but crisscrossed it, and it was obvious at a glance that it was a mess of graffiti. Thinking about Xiaoju's actions just now, it was clearly to prevent him from discovering this painting. When Shen Chuwei woke up, he stretched out contentedly. As expected, sleeping until he wakes up naturally is the most pleasant thing. She put on her clothes slowly and leisurely, walked out from behind the screen, and saw Xiao Jinyan sitting in front of the desk. She walked over happily. "Your Highness, I have returned." Xiao Jinyan knew it when Shen Chuwei was getting dressed. He raised his head and looked at Shen Chuwei, pointed at the painting on the desk, and said quietly, "My beloved concubine, please explain." Shen Chuwei looked in the direction of Xiao Jinyan's finger with a confused look on his face, and saw the calligraphy and painting of his precious son Huo Huo. Only then did she remember that the purpose of following her to the study was to make Xiao Jinyan forget about this painting, not to talk to him about this or that. Looking at Xiao Jinyan's cold face, one could tell that he was angry. If it is said that the son did it, he may be punished and have to set rules and so on. Shen Chuwei immediately became a drama queen. She took out her handkerchief and pretended to wipe the non-existent tears from the corner of her eyes, and said aggrievedly, "Your Highness, I am not as good as a painting and calligraphy." Xiao Jinyan looked at Xiaoju, who had been smiling just now, and suddenly felt aggrieved. He pointed at the calligraphy and painting and said, "When did I compare you with calligraphy and painting? I'm talking about business. Look, I'm here, and your Highness doesn't ask if I'm tired or if you've slept well. He just asks how the painting is. Isn't he saying that I'm not as good as a painting? Your Highness lives with the painting." Bar. After Shen Chuwei finished speaking, she covered her face and ran out aggrievedly, not giving Xiao Jinyan a chance to speak. Xiao Jinyan was stunned on the spot by Shen Chuwei's series of actions. He didn't react until Shen Chuwei's figure disappeared from the door. What did I say wrongly? After Shen Chuwei ran out, he looked back and found that Xiao Jinyan didn't chase him out. He secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he had been fooled. After walking for a while, she looked back and found that Xiao Jinyan really didn't chase him out. She seemed so aggrieved and sad, but Xiao Jinyan didn't care at all. Just like there's nothing wrong, and you won't chase him out? Shen Chu touched his face slightly. Could it be that he was already old and yellow? Returning to the Hehuan Hall, Shen Chuwei took a modern mirror and looked up and down. The ancient bronze mirror didn't shine as clearly as the modern mirror. Changzi came in with clothes in her arms and saw Shen Chuwei sitting in front of the dressing table, looking left and right in the mirror. She walked over curiously, "Master, what's wrong with you?" Shen Chuwei held the mirror and turned to look at Changzi, pointed at her face and asked, "Am I old?" Changzi couldn't help laughing when she heard this. Master, how old are you? How old are you? I also feel that I am not old. Shen Shuwei put down the mirror with a sad look on his face, then His Highness just likes the new and hates the old. Changzi noticed something was wrong with Shen Shuwei and asked worriedly, Master, what's wrong? Shen Shuwei briefly explained what happened just now. Changzi was filled with indignation. Your Highness, too. You know that your master is sad, but you don't even try to comfort him. Shen Shuwei said disdainfully, if he doesn't coax me, I coax myself. Changzi felt extremely distressed when she heard this. Master, that's so unfair to you, how do you want to comfort yourself? Shen Shuwei raised 2 fingers and said, I want 2 crystal elbows for dinner. Changzi stared at the 2 slender fingers for a few seconds. Shen Shuwei felt that the 2 crystal elbows could not coax her at all, thinking that the duck in the henhouse had grown up. Another roast duck. If it can make his master happy, no matter what he eats, Changzi will of course do it without hesitation, let alone crystal elbows and roast duck. Okay, slave, go get ready now. Changzi asked the little rabbit to go to Xiun Pavilion to catch a duck and kill it, and then catch a fish and make sweet and sour fish. During dinner, Xiao Jinyan didn't come over, and he was happy with the new and disliked the old. Shen Shuwei glanced at the food on the table. They were all her favorites. Changzi understood her best. She ate 4 bowls of rice with tears in her eyes. Dao Tao and Susu are now eating on their own, sitting on the baby dining chair with food in front of them, including chopsticks and a spoon. The baby dining chair was a drawing she drew and asked Qin Xiao to find a carpenter to make it custom made. Babies have very strong imitation abilities. When they see adults eating with chopsticks, they will also learn to eat with chopsticks. Even though the food is scattered everywhere, they still try to eat with chopsticks. After dinner, the nannies took Dao Tao and Susu to take a bath. After Shen Shuwei finished taking a bath, she put down the bed curtain and lay down in bed. Just as she was about to close her eyes, she heard the door open, followed by footsteps. She subconsciously thought it was Changzi who came in. Changzi, bolt the door outside the house after you go out. Xiao Jinyan paused and looked back at the door outside the house. If it wasn't him who came in, would he still be able to get in after it was bolted? Good evening, babies. Please support with monthly votes and recommendation votes. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 449. After Shen Shuwei finished speaking, she wrapped herself up in bed and planned to sleep. However, Xiao Jinyan was used to keep her warm every day, but Xiao Jinyan didn't come tonight. In the winter, the bed was a little cold and she couldn't straighten her feet. Thinking that Chun 11 was still there, she ordered again, Chun 11, prepare 2 soup dumplings for me. It's too cold and I can't sleep. Xiao Jinyan walked to the bed and was about to lift the bed curtain when he heard Shen Shuwei's words. He had never seen Xiaju use Tang Posi after sharing the same bed for so long. Why do you want Yu Posi all of a sudden? If his wife wanted it, of course he would be satisfied. He took back his hand, turned around and walked out, telling Changzi to prepare 2 Tang Baizai. When he was ready, Xiao Jinyan came in with a Tang Posi in one hand. When Shen Shuwei heard the footsteps, she knew Changzi was coming, so she sat up in advance. As soon as she sat down, she saw Mrs. Tang coming in from the outside. She couldn't wait to reach out and take it, put it under the quilt, and then pushed it to her feet. At this time, another Yubeiza was also brought in, and she couldn't wait to take it and hug it into her arms. With 2 Yubeiza, she felt warm all of a sudden. Soon, Shen Shuwei discovered that something was wrong with Changzi today. If Chengzi knew that she was cold, he would definitely say something distressed. If you bring it, Yabashi will definitely put it under the quilt and put it at her feet. Probably too tired. Chengzi, there's no need to keep vigil. Go back and rest, Shen Shuwei said and lay back on the bed. With Tang Pozi, she could straighten her feet and not feel cold anymore. Xiao Jinyan had just unbuckled his girdle. After hearing this, he slowly began to take off his clothes and threw them one by one on the clothes rack opposite. Shen Shuwei heard the sound of taking off clothes. He raised his body in confusion, stretched out his hand to lift the bed curtain, and saw a figure standing by the bed, who was taking off his clothes. She raised her arm and could see clearly this time that it was Xiao Jinyan who was taking off his clothes. Isn't the door bolted? How did Xiao Jinyan get in? Was it Xiao Jinyan who handed Mrs. Tang just now? Why are you here, Your Highness? After Xiao Jinyan finished taking off his clothes, he sat down on the bed and looked at Shen Shuwei with a surprised look on his face. It's a coincidence that I came here. If I were a step too late, I wouldn't be able to get in. Only then did Shen Shuwei realize that when Chengzi was asked to lock the door just now, the person who came in was Xiao Jinyan. After Xiao Jinyan went to bed, he put down the bed curtain, took out the night pearl and placed it on the bedside. Through the light of the night pearl, she could see Shen Shuwei's delicate little face. Why are you running today? I ran away, and Your Highness didn't chase her, Shen Shuwei said, turning around and lying on the bed, holding Mrs. Tang in her arms. I have something to deal with. Xiao Jinyan turned the person over to face him and continued to ask, did Dao Tao destroy that painting? Shen Shuwei looked at Xiao Jinyan in shock. How did Your Highness know? Xiao Jinyan asked again, Dao Tao destroyed that painting, why didn't you tell me? Shen Shuwei explained, Dao Tao is only 1 year old, and he doesn't know that the painting is very important. Dao Tao went to the study when he had nothing to do, which shows that Dao Tao is a good child who loves to study. I think His Highness should praise him. Dao Tao is Xiao Jinyan. Shen Shuwei added, besides, for such an important painting, His Highness should put it away after appreciating it, so that Dao Tao won't be around, right? Xiao Jinyan was speechless by Xiaoju's words and retorted. He hugged Xiaoju into his arms and said, I was negligent. Just as Shen Shuwei was secretly congratulating herself on her eloquence, she heard Xiao Jinyan say, it's just that Dao Tao broke into my study without permission. There are no rules at all. As my eldest son, how can he be so unruly? Shen Shuwei reminded, Your Highness, Dao Tao is only 1 year old. Xiao Jinyan said seriously, it is precisely because he is 1 year old and needs good guidance. Shen Shuwei sighed helplessly, he was so tired, and he wanted his son to be so tired too. Your Highness, shouldn't we let our son have a happy childhood? Xiao Jinyan was stunned, a happy childhood. Why does this sentence sound familiar to him? Shen Shuwei continued, when people grow up, they will have stress and worries, so childhood is very important. Let's have free time, okay? Free range? Xiao Jinyan was stunned again, because this sentence also felt very familiar. What is free-range farming? Shen Shuwei thought for a while and explained, free-range care means that we don't care about him, we don't restrain him, and we let him grow upright. Let's talk about it after childhood. Xiao Jinyan expressed doubt, are you sure it's growing straight and not crookedly? With Your Highness as a benchmark, how can my son grow crooked so easily? Don't worry, Your Highness, free-range children can still be excellent. After all, my son has such excellent genes as Your Highness, so he won't be any worse. Shen Shuwei always praised Xiao Jinyan. Who doesn't like to hear nice words? Xiao Jinyan is no exception. What if it grows crookedly? Well. Shen Shu slightly tugged at Xiao Jinyan's shirt, but the shirt was pulled open, revealing a large area of fair skin. Then, make another trumpet and continue practicing in a different way. You will definitely reach the full level. Xiao Jinyan was confused when he heard this, trumpet. Full level. Shen Shuwei explained, just give birth to a son and let His Highness teach him personally. You're pretty open-minded, but, Xiao Jinyan paused here. Shen Shuwei couldn't help but ask, but what? Xiao Jinyan said slowly, one son is indeed not enough. I am the future prince. I must have at least 3 or 4 sons. The best one will be chosen as the prince. Your Highness wants to take a concubine for yourself. Tomorrow I will pack up and either leave the palace or go to the cold palace. Shen Shuwei knew that it was simply a fantasy for the emperor's family to have only one woman. When an emperor becomes an emperor, he must have 3 palaces and 6 courtyards. Xiao Jinyan couldn't help but emphasize his tone and said, I have never thought of taking a concubine. Shen Shuwei said in a bad tone, then your Highness wants so many sons, 3 or 4, why not 10? Xiao Jinyan looked up and down at her petite body, can your delicate body give me 10 children? Shen Shuwei seemed to understand one thing, your Highness means that I should give birth to one person. Xiao Jinyan said word by word, I will not break my promise to you. Who else can give birth to children for me except you? Shen Shuwei directly refused, I can't give birth to a child, no matter how fine the child is. Xiao Jinyan said earnestly, so the eldest son needs to be carefully taught, so that there is no need to give birth to so many sons. Hey! Shen Shuwei found that she was being tricked by Xiao Jinyan. After all, he was still going to deprive her son of a happy childhood. She began to bargain, how about letting the baby roam free before he is 5 years old, and then your Highness will teach him carefully after he is 5 years old. Xiao Jinyan said faintly, I have no objection, as long as my beloved concubine guarantees that he will not grow up crooked. Shen Shuwei said confidently, Dao Tao is a smart child, so he will not grow up crooked. Xiao Jinyan, I hope so. Shen Shuwei yawned, I'm so sleepy, your Highness, let's take a rest. Xiao Jinyan's slender fingers lifted her chin, don't run again next time, do you hear me? When it comes to this, Shen Shuwei feels it is necessary to teach Xiao Jinyan a lesson. That is the performance of my concubine being wronged. At this time, your Highness should rush out to show that your Highness has me in his heart. If your Highness does not chase me out, my concubine will be sad and upset, and your Highness may not even be able to come in at night. At the end, Shen Shuwei kindly reminded him. Xiao Jinyan didn't expect that she was too busy to chase Xiaoju out, which made Xiaoju so uncomfortable, and she couldn't help but blame herself. Didn't you have dinner tonight? I asked Chengzi to prepare some and send it over. Shen Shuwei saw Xiao Jinyan was about to get up. She had eaten 2 crystal elbows and half a duck tonight, and her stomach was still full. She hurriedly reached out and held Xiao Jinyan's hand, it's so late, Chengzi has also fallen asleep, I'm not hungry now. Xiao Jinyan said seriously, don't be strong in front of me. Shen Shuwei nodded vigorously, I won't be strong in front of His Highness. Xiao Jinyan hugged her tightly and promised, I won't let this happen in the future. How important is communication between husband and wife? Shen Shuwei deeply realized that it was not like in romance novels, where the male and female protagonists said nothing, it would be strange if there was no misunderstanding. After a snow, the courtyard was covered with silver and very beautiful. Shen Shuwei hadn't been to the small vegetable garden for a long time. She put on a fox fur and went out with Chengzi. Dao Tao sneaked into the prince's bedroom next door from the back door. Susu played in the snow with Suichuan, Xiaobai, and Yuan Gungun. Shen Shuwei always let the 2 children go, changing their clothes when they got dirty, and keeping them happy was the most important thing. Susu sat on Xiaobai and rode happily. When she was having fun, she saw Shen Shuwei walking out of the Hehuan Palace, and her beautiful big eyes were full of curiosity. When she found that Shen Shuwei went out without her, Susu pouted in dissatisfaction and got off Xiaobai, but she didn't stand firmly and rolled in the snow. Then she stood up neatly, patted the snow on her body, and chased after her. Susu had short legs and walked slowly. When she reached the door, Shen Chuwei and Chengzi had already walked away. Sichuan followed and stood beside Susu. She saw Shen Chuwei's back from a distance, so she walked in front to lead the way. Susu held the door frame and raised her short legs to cross the threshold. Because of her short legs, she sat on the threshold. Then she put one foot on the ground first, then climbed over the threshold and chased after him. The threshold was meaningless to Xiaobai, and he easily crossed it. It was also meaningless to Yuan Gungun, and he easily jumped over it. Susu walked with her short legs, following Sichuan with a shaky step. A white tiger and a gray rabbit followed Susu slowly. Sichuan looked back at Susu as he walked, fearing that Susu would be lost. Huaixiang accompanied Chang Liangyuan to the prince's bedroom with a food box. Seeing Susu from a distance, she reminded her, "My lady, isn't that the little princess? Why is she here alone?" Chang Liangyuan looked in the direction of Huaixiang's finger and saw Susu in a pink cotton coat, walking with a shaky step, as if she would fall at any time. Chang Liangyuan looked around and didn't see any adults. "Go and have a look. Good night, babies. Please support me with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 450. My lord, the ground is slippery, please be careful. With Huaixiang's support, Chang Liangyuan slowly came to Susu and stopped her. "Susu, do you still remember me?" Susu grabbed the little fur ball on her body with her little hands and tilted her head to look curiously at the adult in front of her. Chang Liangyuan looked at Susu's silent appearance and continued to ask, "Why did you come out alone? Isn't there anyone following you?" Susu played with the little fur ball in her hand and said in a sweet voice, "Mom, look for Mom." "Looking for Mom? What is it?" Chang Liangyuan stared at the little fur ball in Susu's hand. It was a decoration on the cotton clothes. The fur ball was as white as snowflakes. She recognized it at a glance as the little dress in the hands of Queen Last Moon, and the collar and cuffs of the dress were the terry loops are extremely rare snow fox hair from the Tianshan Mountains. They are a big tribute from the Kanglang tribe. There are only so many of them, and they are all made into clothes for Susu. And this little fur ball is also made of the fur of Tianshan snow fox. Its tentacles are warm and its hair is extremely soft. Susu loves the two little fur balls on her body the most. She plays with them in her hands whenever she has nothing to do, and they also serve as hand warmers. Chang Liangyuan stared at the snow-white soft fur on Susu's body. Shen's little face was pink and tender, especially beautiful. If we make fox fur or cotton clothes for her, they will definitely keep her warm and beautiful. Sichuan turned around and found that Susu had not followed, so he turned around and ran back. When he saw Chang Liangyuan, he bared his teeth and yelled, "Meow!" Chang Liangyuan saw Xuetuan coming. She was still a little scared when facing Xuetuan. Then she looked at a rabbit and a rabbit behind Susu. After taking a closer look, she realized that they looked very similar to tigers. Chang Liangyuan had never seen a white tiger, and since Susu could be used as a pet, it would not be a ferocious tiger, but a tiger-like cat. Even so, Chang Liangyuan was startled and she didn't react for a long time. Susu held the fur ball with her little hands and saw the snow ball coming. She looked in the direction where Shen Chuwei left, looking for Mom. Susu said, then bypassed Chang Liangyuan and continued walking forward. As soon as Susu left, Xiaobai and Yuangun followed him leisurely. Sichuan stared at Chang Liangyuan for a while, then turned around and followed her. Chang Liangyuan came to her senses and found that Susu was gone. She followed him without giving up. "Susu." Susu stopped and looked back at Chang Liangyuan in confusion. Chang Lianyuan looked around. It was cold today and almost everyone couldn't leave the house, so there was almost no one in the garden at this time. Next to it is the lotus pond, which has frozen because the temperature is too low. She looked back at Susu, pointed to the lotus pond on the side and said, "Susu, look, there are flowers over there, do you want to play?" Although Susu can't speak long sentences, she can understand some adults' words, such as "do you want to go play?" "I want to play." Her milky voice made people's hearts melt when they heard it. Chang Lianyuan looked at Susu's cute appearance and thought that it would be great if this was her daughter. Then not only Xiao Jinyan would love her so much, but the emperor and the queen would also love her. It's a pity that this is Shen Shui's daughter. Jealousy made Chang Lianyuan have vicious thoughts in her heart. She led Susu to the lake and asked Huaixiang to stand there watching the wind. There was a sparrow on the ice that seemed to be injured, flapping its wings and failing to fly. Chang Lianyuan pointed at the sparrow and coaxed, "Susu, look, there is a sparrow there, do you want it?" "I want to get it myself." Children are very curious and playful, and Susu is no exception. When she saw the sparrow that kept flapping its wings, she pointed at the sparrow and made a sweet sound to the snowball, "Woo, tuan tuan." Tuan tuan refers to snow dumpling. Because the pronunciation of the word snow is a bit difficult, so every time we call it snow dumpling, it means snow dumpling. Xue Tuan looked at the sparrows on the ice, licked his lips, and walked over. Susu was so excited when she saw it, she pointed at the snowballs and her big beautiful eyes smiled like crescent moons. Chang Lianyuan saw that Susu was standing still and had no intention of going down, so she couldn't help but feel a little anxious. How could she fall into the lake if she didn't go down? "Susu, can you go find Swichuan?" Susu tilted her head and stared at Chang Lianyuan for a long time, then looked at Xue Tuan, and saw that Xue Tuan had walked to the sparrow, was pushing the sparrow with her little paws, and immediately danced happily. Chang Lianyuan. What a fool, he can't even understand what he's saying. Chang Lianyuan had no choice but to coax Susu to walk onto the ice on her own, but no matter how she coaxed or deceived, Susu just stood still, pointing at the snowballs and babbling, not knowing what she was talking about. Finally, Chang Lianyuan became anxious. She looked around and saw no one. She stretched out her hand to push Susu, but the push was empty. Her figure threw herself onto the ice, and her whole face was hit so hard that her nose was crooked. Susu happily took 2 steps forward and successfully avoided Chang Lianyuan's push. When she saw Chang Lianyuan lying on the ice, she squatted down and stared at Chang Lianyuan curiously. Chang Lianyuan's face was numb with pain. Looking at the cold ice, she was secretly glad that the ice was not broken, otherwise she would have fallen into the lake. I saw Susu squatting down, pointing at herself with a fleshy finger, and saying with a smile, "Climb, crawl." Susu thought Chang Lianyuan was lying there because she wanted to crawl, because she could crawl while lying on the ground. Chang Lianyuan rolled her eyes, and when she was about to get up with her hands on the ice, she heard a crisp click sound, which frightened her and turned her face pale. That was the sound of the ice breaking. Chang Lianyuan saw the gap in the ice and didn't care about anything else. "Huaixiang, come and save me." Chang Lianyuan was about to cry, but Huaixiang didn't come over. Xiaobai realized something was wrong, opened his mouth and bit Susu's sleeve and walked aside. He walked very slowly, fearing that Susu would fall. As soon as Susu was taken away by Xiaobai, there was a click sound, and several holes opened in the ice. Chang Lianyuan was caught off guard and fell into the cold lake. "Help, help." Huaixiang, who was standing there relaxing, turned around when he heard the cry for help and saw Chang Lianyuan falling into the lake. He was so frightened that he hurried over. "Little master, why did you fall into the lake? Save me quickly, save me quickly." Chang Lianyuan kept slapping the surface of the lake. When the cold lake water overflowed her head, She took a few mouthfuls of cold lake water. Xiaobai bit Susu's sleeve and held her far away. Xue Tuan saw someone falling into the water with a sparrow in his mouth. He raised his head and scanned the shore. When he saw Susu standing there, he ran over with the sparrow in his mouth. The sparrow suffered some injuries, and when the snowball was put into its mouth, it thought that it was going to be the cat's meal, and it fainted from the fright. Susu saw Xue Tuan holding the sparrow in her mouth, reached out and took the sparrow from Xue Tuan's mouth, poked the sparrow's head with her small hand, and blew with her small mouth, hoo-hoo. Unfortunately, Sparrow, who had fainted, could not give Susu any response. Susu's attention was completely attracted by the sparrow, and she had long forgotten about Chang Liangyuan. She held the sparrow in one hand and the fur ball in the other, and followed Xue Tuan to continue looking for Mom. Chang Liangyuan was rescued by a passing guard. After being rescued, Chang Liangyuan was unconscious and cold. When she was sent back to Xinlan Palace, she had a high fever. Asterisk. Shen Shuwei looked at the chicken coop. Chickens lay eggs, ducks lay eggs, and ducks. After such a long cycle, there are already more than 100 chickens and ducks. The chicken coop is full. It's okay in winter. It's warmer when crowded. But in the summer, so many chickens and ducks are crowded together, and it gets very hot. Xiao Gaizi, wait until spring to build a duck house next to it, and then separate the chickens and ducks. Master, I have written it down, Xiao Gaizi responded happily. After seeing the chicken coop, Shen Shuwei came to the vegetable garden and looked at the vegetables in the greenhouse. They were all growing very well. They had few bugs in ancient times and did not require pesticides. They were truly organic vegetables. Susu followed Xue Tuan and walked for a long time before arriving at Xiaoxiang Pavilion. Only Xiao Gaizi and Gai Xiang were looking at Xiaoxiang Pavilion, so the huge Xiaoxiang Pavilion seemed very empty. Xue Tuan jumped in neatly and went straight to the small vegetable garden. Susu held onto the door frame and raised her short legs to cross the threshold. Not surprisingly, she sat down on the threshold because of her short legs. Susu was used to this. After entering, Susu caught up with Xue Tuan on her short legs. Xiaobai and Yuan Gun were like two guards, even jumping into the threshold in unison. When passing the chicken coop, Susu heard an O sound, stopped and looked over curiously, and then heard another quacking sound. Susu heard the sound and ran over with two short legs, lying on the fence. From the gap in the fence, she saw a lot of chickens and ducks inside. It was as if she saw something novel, so she couldn't bear to leave while lying on the fence. Xiaobai stood next to Susu and saw the chicken and duck inside. He was so greedy that he almost drooled. After Yuan Gun came in, he ran into the small vegetable garden. When he saw the cabbage, he ran over quickly and opened his mouth to eat it. When Shen Shuwei came out of the greenhouse, she told Chengzi, "Bring some more eggs back to make egg custard for the babies." Chengzi was carrying a bamboo basket filled with fresh vegetables. Hearing this, he happily responded, "Slave, go get the eggs right now." Xiao Gaizi delivers eggs to Hehuan Hall every day. When I come today, I will take some back with me. Chengzi walked happily to get the eggs. Shen Shuwei saw Xue Tuan running towards him before he took a few steps. He immediately had a bad feeling. Xue Tuan was following Susu all day long. If Su Tuan was here, would Susu also be here? As soon as his thoughts changed, he heard Chengzi shouting, "Master, come quickly." Shen Shuwei held up the hem of her skirt and ran over, and saw a small pink figure standing next to the chicken coop, staring intently at the chickens and ducks, or to be precise, at the chicks and ducklings. Susu saw Shen Shuwei and ran towards her happily, "Mommy, mommy hug." Shen Shuwei knelt down in front of Susu, "Susu, why are you here?" Susu pointed at Xue Tuan and said in a sweet voice, "Tuan Tuan, follow Tuan Tuan." Swichuan lowered his head and retreated to Xiaobai, trying to reduce his presence. In fact, without Susu's explanation, Shen Shuwei also knew that Swichuan brought her here. Susu raised the sparrow in her hand and showed it to Shen Shuwei. "Mama, Mao Mao, Mao Mao." Shen Shuwei looked at the sparrow in Susu's hand and didn't know where the baby girl got it. She took it over and checked it and found that it was not dead. The daughter probably meant that she wanted to save the sparrow. Of course she couldn't let her daughter down, so she took out a silver needle, and under her medical skills, the sparrow immediately woke up, and the next second, it spread its wings and flew away. The sparrow's wings were not injured. It couldn't fly at first because its body was frozen. It had already warmed up after being covered by Susu. It flew away because it was afraid of being eaten by snowballs. Susu opened her eyes wide and watched the sparrow fluttering its wings to the sky. "Mom, the gray is gone." Shen Chu smiled and praised, "Baby saved the sparrow's life, it's great." Susu stretched out her hand to hug her. "Mom, hug me." Shen Chuwei picked up her daughter and saw Xiaobai staring at the chicken coop, almost drooling. "You can't eat it now." Xiaobai felt extremely aggrieved. Ouch. Good evening, babies. Please support with monthly votes and recommendation votes.